What up, guys? The Bench Buddies are back with our Week 10 NCAA football preview and picks. As always, I got Ty joining me here to break down this week's games. But before we can talk about this week's games, we got to talk about last week. Ty going 12 and 0, perfect record, and he can't do much better than that.
Yeah, I guess you could say I'm back. I guess the biggest one I had to sweat out was Michigan, kind of letting the Spartans back in at the end of the game, but coming out with a win. And the story of the week, I think, is Texas A&M. They make the quarterback change, and everything changed. I don't know if that's just Marcel Reed being the next Cam Newton, or if LSU just made zero preparation for that potentially happening. But it was a crazy turn of events, and Texas A&M is the top dog in the SEC right now.
Yeah, I mean, I can agree with you there with A&M. Obviously, that was a big surprise. I mean, LSU was what, winning up by 13, 11, something like
Mhm.
that, and then made the switch. A&M obviously dominated from there. But my biggest takeaway, like you said, kind of like the Michigan game, finding a way to win. That's SMU for me, going on the road at Duke, and Duke was 6-1, finding a way to escape in OT, stop them on the 2-point conversion, block the field goal to possibly win it in regulation. So SMU team to watch out for because they just keep finding ways to win ball games. And just like those Hoosiers and Pitt Panthers, they keep finding ways to win and they keep producing. And I think it's kind of the time where you have to take these teams seriously. But, last week, not really too much here for us to brag about, both going 3-3. First three bets didn't hit. Obviously, the Syracuse game, don't need to talk about that. Notre Dame just exploded against Navy, so that under didn't happen. But the Indiana, Vandy 18.5, and the Colorado 6.5 all did happen. So probably an even week for you guys as well.
Yep, even week for me as well. Missouri getting blown out, so I never had to sweat that one. Went with the emotional hedge, picking against my team. You win. It's a win-win situation. Didn't work out. And Oklahoma State, I think I'm just done touching their games because, I mean, they have what was supposed to be the best running back in the country, but they're 0-5 in the Big 12. So I don't know what's going on there. But Penn State looking impressive on the road. Oregon dominant at home, and we already covered Texas A&M with their crazy second half performance.
Yeah, and then this week, the only thing we have the same is that Arkansas +7 versus Ole Miss. I think that's just going to be a great game this week. Penn State +3.5 versus Ohio State. I think this game, it's going to be one of those two teams either wins by three or less. I think it's just going to be that kind of game. Florida, Georgia, I'm taking the over. I think Georgia's going to put up like 40 on Florida, but I think Florida can score probably 13 on that defense. Oregon, 15.5 at Michigan. Yeah, I have it as my lock. I mean, even as a Michigan fan, I don't know how that spreads that low. I thought it would at least be three touchdowns. So I'm definitely hopping on that. Indiana -8 at Michigan State. Now, I get Michigan State played good last week against Michigan, but they lost to a team that can't throw the ball. Now, Indiana hopefully is getting their starting quarterback back this week. And if he does play, I think Indiana is going to roll in this one. And obviously they have Ellison too, who's been outstanding in the backfield. And then the A&M South Carolina, I am going to go with the under in this one, and you'll see why later.
Yeah, for me, I'm going Duke +20. Like you just said, they were 6-1, now 6-2. But I mean, Miami hasn't really blown anyone out this year. It seems like every time they play a decent team, it comes right down to the wire. So I'm banking on that again. Rocking with Arkansas as well. Ole Miss, yes, they're what are they 6-2 at this point? I think they are.
Mhm.
Arguably the best defense in the country, but just not a lot of firepower on offense. I don't see them completely running away with that game. Illinois, a home dog against Minnesota. I was surprised by that one. I think they win the game outright in an ugly game. I'm going the other way. I'm going Ohio State and Michigan State. So flip flop in those games. I'm not betting for Ohio State or against Penn State. I'm betting against James Franklin in a big game. He hasn't shown me that he can get it done. He's 1-9 against Ohio State. I think he gets to 1-10 now with about a 7-point win. In Michigan State, yes, they somehow lost to Michigan, who has been awful this year, but they actually did some good things in that game. They ran the ball well, they stopped the run. I actually think they can be competitive with Indiana. And I think Clemson is probably my lock of the week. Louisville has just not been impressive.
Mhm.
And I think Clemson's the best team in the ACC right now. I think they're better than Miami. So I think they dominate that game at home.
Yeah, then we'll start off with that Duke Miami game. Obviously, I'm taking Miami. And like you said, Cam Ward and company, they've been outstanding, scoring lots of points, but the defense has been questionable at times. And, we saw a few weeks ago, Miami beat Louisville 52-45. Now, Louisville has no business scoring 45 points. at any time this year. That offense is struggling. And I can kind of see the same result here. I think Duke does have a good bounce back game, like you said. But I still can see Miami here kind of blowing them out in the fourth quarter.
Yeah, Duke, a little better than Louisville, but it's mostly their defense. They don't have the same firepower as Louisville on offense. But I do think they cover here. But I don't think it's like your typical Miami game this year where they have to eke it out. I think they win by 10 to 14 points here. A little more comfortable than usual.
And then on ESPN, I'm going with the first upset of the week. I like Arkansas at home here. Now, you have Tennessee that already visited Arkansas, and obviously Arkansas came out on top. I kind of could see the same result here. I think Ole Miss is kind of due for those one of those Lane Kiffin losses at the end of the year where they kind of eliminate themselves and can't find a way to the SEC championship. I think this is that game where it's going to happen, and if Arkansas can stay healthy throughout the game, yeah, Arkansas is a good 5-3 team that I don't think is getting enough credit for.
Yeah, I think at night I might be leaning the other way. This is almost a coin flip game for me, but I live by the defense travels motto. I think that's going to be the case here for Ole Miss. Like I said, I think they're statistically the best defense in the country right now. Not a lot of 17 somewhere in there.
And then the biggest game of the week, obviously, you got Ohio State, Penn State, and 4 versus 3, a 1A top spot in the Big Ten if you win this game. And pretty much you're going to guarantee your spot in the college football playoff if you get this win. Obviously, I'm going to go with Penn State. I know you're bashing on James Franklin. I mean, rightfully so. It's, as a Michigan fan, we can do that because we beat them all the time and so on and so forth. But I think if this isn't the year, I'm sorry to say it, but I feel like you got to get rid of the guy. I mean, I know he's a winner and he can do everything for you, but if you can't win a big game and yeah, unless you're happy going 9-3 and squeaking into the playoff conversation every year and maybe get in and then get blown out, keep him Penn State. But Drew Aller that has been great. Singleton's been great. The defense has been really good. They haven't faced an Ohio State offense, but I think Penn State somehow, some way can leave with a victory, and I think special teams is going to play a big part in this game.
Yeah, I think this is a huge game for both of these coaches. The Ohio State fan base has been all over Ryan Day. Some of them even wanting him fired at this point after their last two performances. And we know all the stats with James Franklin: 1-9 against Ohio State, similar record against top 10, top five teams. So for them, it's like if not now, then when? With Ohio State struggling so much. But that being said, I still think Ohio State has the firepower to get it done. Penn State's offense has not faced anything like Ohio State's defense yet this year. And obviously, Ohio State already having faced Oregon. They have experience with playing top teams in the country already. So it's going to be a tough environment, but it's not a night whiteout at Penn State. So it'll be a little easier. That might be the difference. I think Ohio State wins the game.
And like you said, Illinois somehow getting 3 points at home makes too much sense here. So maybe Vegas knows something we don't. But give Minnesota credit. They are one of those fringe average top Big Ten teams that, doesn't get enough credit. So I do think this will be a good game. But let's be honest, no one's going to be watching this game.
Yeah, this will be your typical Big Ten West game, 13 to 10, something like that. Minnesota, I don't know how PJ Fleck keeps doing it. They come into the year, everyone thinks they're going to be awful, and it seems like every year they're 8-4. Nothing to write home about, but they're always a decent team in the Big Ten. With that being said, they got to go on the road this week against an Illinois team coming off a blowout loss to Oregon. So I think that's the motivation they'll need. And even as the home dog, I think they get the win.
They're moving to 3:30. Obviously, you got the Florida-Georgia rivalry. And really the biggest news coming into this game is that next year and the year after, they're going to be playing in Atlanta and Tampa because Jacksonville's stadium situation. But coming in this game, I forgot to change the Week 10 and the LSU Texas A&M, but the spread's correct with Georgia at 16. I think Georgia's going to win it all this year at this point in the season. And I think they're going to make a huge statement against Florida here. And Billy Napier, yeah, he's probably gone at the end of the year.
Yeah, it's unfortunate for him because Florida's actually been playing some decent football. A lot of people thought they might finish like 3-9 after how they started and looking at their schedule. And I agree, he's probably gone because their schedule's absolutely brutal. They're probably going to finish, 6-6 at best. And I think they could put up a fight. They could potentially cover in this game, make it a one-score game in the second half. But Georgia just has way too much for them, and that defensive line is just going to eat for Georgia. So I think they run away with it in the end.
Yeah, and then 3:30, obviously we got our team playing Michigan at home, gets Oregon. Now, coming into the year, I would have said probably this is the game you want to circle on the calendar that'll decide the Big Ten. But how things have changed, I mean, Oregon has lived up to their part of the bargain where Michigan has not. And obviously, even as a Michigan fan, I gotta go with what I guess politically correct or however you want to say what I should do, even though no bias aside, I'm taking Oregon. They're the better team, and like you said, defense travels, and this is a great situation for that. Because Michigan, I don't see anybody really making any big plays here.
Yeah, unfortunately for me, I always believe in my team, as you can see. The big thing for Michigan, force turnovers, run the ball well, and you never know. Things can fall their way. I think this team does have, for the first time all year, they have some momentum coming off that win over Michigan State. They had that win over USC earlier in the year, but they threw for 5 yards. So how big of a win really is that? So this is the first complete performance they've had this year. And now you get number one coming into your home stadium. Hopefully, Will Johnson can strap it up this game and get back out there. They say he's not packing it in for the season. So we'll see what happens. But a lot of bias involved. But Michigan ekes out a close one, shocks the world.
Now, let's get back to reality here. We got Indiana going on the road to Michigan State. And like you said earlier, I think this game is going to be a pretty good game. But I think Indiana is going to pull away at the end and cover because I think they're going to kick a late field goal to get it to 10, two-possession game. That's how they're going to win. But don't be shocked if Michigan State is maybe up at halftime or if it's tied at halftime because, home game, you got an undefeated team coming into your place after you just lost to your rival. This is one of those punch you in the mouth kind of games where you respond. And I don't know. I feel like something is cooking here where Indiana could get upset here. Because game day was set their place last week and so on and so forth. All the hype is around them now. But like he says, just Google me. He finds ways to win games. They always win wherever he goes. And I think the trend continues this week.
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm going with in this game. Michigan State, they do a lot of things well this year. Obviously, last year they were pretty awful with the whole Mel Tucker situation. The season just got away from them. But one team in this game shoots themselves in the foot just too many times, and that's Michigan State. So I think that's going to be the difference. I see this actually being, a really close game in the fourth quarter. But like we saw in the Michigan game, this Michigan State team will just make one too many mistakes, whether it's an Aiden Childs interception, committing some big penalties. And Indiana, just such a well-coached team right now. And I think they keep it going, even with this tough road game.
And moving to the nightcap, I think this one's pretty easy on paper, just for straight up picks. Got to take Clemson at home. Like you said, I think they are the better team in the ACC right now over Miami, despite their record. And it seems like that's typical Clemson these last few years. They get blown out or don't show up week one. And after that, they decide, oh, well, I guess we should turn it on now and, make sure people still think we're good. And I think that's the case. 6-1, Cade Klubnik has been awesome, kind of like Trevor Lawrence, awesome for this Clemson team. And they find a way to keep on winning, flying under the radar. Clemson could be a scary team come playoff time because not too many people are really taking aware of what Clemson's doing right now.
Yeah, it does feel weird that Clemson, of all teams, is flying under the radar, but that's exactly what's happening. They did get blown out week one by Georgia, got overwhelmed, and I think everyone just kind of wrote them off, similar to Notre Dame. And since then, they've done is just dominate 6 games in a row. I don't see them slowing down here. I think the 10.5 is pretty low, and I think they will cover that. Louisville's just not been super impressive this year, and I think Clemson dominates at home.
And then 7:30 ABC, probably the game you're going to be watching. And you're looking at that right. Yeah, I am taking South Carolina at home. I think this is one of those Texas A&M typical stories and kind of Jimbo Fisher storyline as well, where they finally get a big win and now it's their own destiny. They control it. And going into South Carolina, we saw it last year, upset a big team in the SEC kind of around this time. And they do it once a year. And I think this is that perfect game where it happens. And you can tell Vegas might think the same thing as well as A&M's only favored by 2.5 here. So give me the Gamecocks at home, kind of shocking the SEC and really making the SEC anyone's race again.
Yeah, I almost had to plug my nose and pick this one because this is the hardest game for me to pick this week. I can't remember if you had this as a lock, but I don't know if I would bet this game either way after that Marcel Reed, just Lamar Jackson like performance last week. I think either he's going to do that again and Texas A&M dominates this game, or it goes the other way. A team is actually prepared for him and they lay an egg. So I don't see this being anywhere near the 2.5, whether it's a Texas A&M blowout or a complete letdown. But I think it'll be one of the two. I'm banking on Marcel Reed still performing at a really high level. And I know South Carolina's got a good defense, but it just seems like they keep coming up short in these games this year. And I think they will one more time this week.
Yeah, then at 8 o'clock. Now, this is the game you need to watch if you love football. Undefeated Pitt versus 7-1 SMU, both ACC opponents. And this game is huge. More than likely a chance to play Miami in the ACC championship. Taking SMU at home, 7.5 is kind of a lot of points here. I'm kind of surprised that it's that big of a line. So I might take Pitt on the road with the 7. But SMU, like I said, they find ways to win games, and their loss early on to BYU, who's undefeated still. People, I think that they aren't getting enough credit either. So SMU really could be a top 10 team right now if they don't suffer that loss to BYU.
Yeah, 100%. I think SMU is a tough team to follow this year because they've been very up. I know they're 7-1, but they've still been very up and down. Some weeks they come in and they just dominate like they should. And last week, obviously, right down to the wire with Duke in a game they were favored by double digits to win. So never know what you're going to get out of this team. But I still think playing at home, this team has a lot more talent than Pitt. And I think that's going to be the difference. I think, 7-1, everything to play for still for SMU. And I think they get it to 8-1 and put themselves in the ACC race.
Yeah, and that's going to be it for our Week 10 preview and picks. Check back next week to see the biggest results from the biggest games, see how we did. Then obviously we'll break down next week's games as well. But until the next time, the Bench Buddies are out.